Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Optimal Championship League. Apologies for a little bit of an off-kilter entry today as we were thrown directly into the draft, and therefore, Alls, given that we introduced ourselves yesterday, let's hop right into this ban phase. We have Optimal Esports Nova on blue, Divine Temple on red, and we got a Lux, Poppy, and Rel ban coming out of Optimal Esports. Meanwhile, Divine Temple are denying Milio, Oriana, and Viego.
Yeah, none of these bans from OE Nova are particularly surprising. We've seen owners spamming this rel in solo queue recently for Divine Temple. The Poppy is very commonly picked by Wushu Wu in the top lane, and Shadows in the bot lane as the support loves playing that Lux. Meanwhile, on the other side, we've seen a little bit of Viego coming out from Bone Zone. The Oriana has been seen a whole lot more recently from Wild Cinderace in the mid lane, and the Milio is just super strong, as you love to tell me day in and day out.
Yep. And that means that there's still quite a few interesting things to pick up, especially in the marksman role. We're seeing the Misfortune prioritized for Divine Temple alongside the Wukong that they've gotten for themselves. OEN, on the other hand, went for that first pick, Sejuani, to just have their tankiness out of the way early. Now it's going to be all about forging towards that damage and facilitation of that damage that oftentimes defines the kind of high tempo games that we see here in the OCL.
Yeah, speaking of high tempo, Wukong Misfortune, that is a team comp built around fighting already, just two champions in. And this is a champion pair that we've seen quite a bit. Owner has played the Wukong twice. Static has the MF tied for most played champion in their champ pool in OCL. So lots and lots of practice on these two champions. Lots and lots of practice in getting that combo up just right in these team fights.
Yep. This is a Nautilus hover, interestingly enough, to go alongside Major's Zeri. It will be grabbed. This is definitely not a combination you see a lot of. What's interesting to me is that this seems to be a build that is less centered around this champion, particularly as she has been nerfed, has been forced back into a more traditional build path. And what that speaks to me is that, yeah, they're going to try to keep the Zeri safe, but I think that it's much more just about using her as a traditional marksman rather than being the gravitational center for the entirety of the team.
This is also a bit of denial away from Shadow Omen and the Divine Temple squad, as the Nautilus is far and away the most picked champion in that support role for them. So, while it might not work as well with the Zeri as you mentioned, it's still powerful in that it's a denial tool. And as well, forcing the red side to go ahead and tip their hand in the top lane with that Ornn. We've heard from PO1 that this top laner for OE Nova likes picking counterpick, likes picking unusual champions in the top lane. So knowing that they're going to be facing up into the Ornn, I'm excited to see what's coming out of the hat here.
Yep, for sure. The Ornn is something that you usually see all the way down, and often on blue side as a blind pick on the B4, B5 slot, which are interchangeable with one another. But the fact that we're seeing red grab it shows that they really want to just have a stable, guaranteed value top lane. It could also be a read that this isn't going to be Sejuani jungle, but rather Sejuani top, and therefore what they're trying to do is just build a very passive lane where both teams are looking to scale up and then bring themselves to 5v5s. And by doing this, you're kind of cutting off a full half of the map that the junglers would have to worry about. And by doing that, it means that we have a lot of concentrated action around core carry members like the Zeri and Misfortune.
Yeah, and more importantly for Divine Temple, you have a lot of focus around the mid laner. Cuddy's in this role has the most kills of anyone in OCL through week 3. There are 3 Divine Temple members in the top 10 for kills. So focusing on this mid laner for Divine Temple is not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination, as it looks like they are going to hold counterpick for that mid lane the Janna picked up for Shadow Omen.
I like the Janna quite a bit. I do think that this is kind of one of the situations where, even though it's a Nautilus lane, I don't think that Major and Crispy are actually exerting that much kill pressure, and therefore having something that is so overwhelmingly protective might actually, in the long run, not be that valuable, because you want to snowball Shadow Omen as hard as possible, and the way that you do that in most cases is by fighting fire with fire. I think that a Taric would have been good here, as it's a direct counter to Nautilus. Rel would be insane in in this situation, Leona as well. But fact of the matter is, Janna will provide a lot of value in that late game as well, repelling initial advance from Sejuani, Zeri, or even Rumble now, as we're seeing that come out for Optimal Esports Nova. And I'm not knocking Janna whatsoever. I love this champion, and I think that she could have tons of value. I just think that this is much more about what the support of Divine Temple is comfortable on, much more so than it is necessarily the correct pick to smash this 2v2.
Yeah, and speaking on that, what they're comfortable on, it's very interesting because there's such a disconnect between what this player plays in solo queue and what they played in competitive. Because for this Divine Temple squad, they played almost exclusively tanks and engaged champions. So seeing this Janna come out, which is much more up their solo queue wheelhouse of supportive enchanters, it's going to be interesting to see whether they can carry that when it's so different from what the team has normally seen them on. That being said, this mid lane is shaping up to be very interesting with Twisted Fate into Victor. How are you feeling about that, Nyarko?
I think that this is going to be one of those situations where Victor's immobility is going to be the thing that is most exploited by OEN. They aren't necessarily looking to crush the Victor in lane. They know that the scaling is going to be on Divine Temple side anyway, because they have the Ornn, they have the Wukong, they have the Janna. Therefore, what they're trying to do is just get some plays going in these side lanes as soon as possible. And the way you do that is by getting that Destiny, teleporting in, and hopefully setting up with a gold card.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure around the map. And with Rumble and Zeri, who can both really take advantage of just a small window to make things happen, the Twisted Fate, when you hit level 6, is going to have a significant amount of pressure here. I'm very curious to see what this OE Nova squad decides to do with the early map pressure, whether they decide to let this Sejuani just farm up early, or whether Bone Zone tries to get some ganks out early, trying to affect some of these lanes, which, in my mind, outside of the Rumble, are all going to be scaling up a little bit slowly here.
Yeah, and while we don't have much in the way of flex potential between these two teams, besides maybe the Rumble Sejuani swap, what I will note is that apparently PO1 is going to a new champion. You said they've only played 3 so far in the entirety of the OCL. What do you feel about the fact that, yeah, this is in fact going to be a Rumble versus Ornn?
Well, PO1, it's a little bit disingenuous to say that they're playing a new champion here because they have only played a single game on every champion that they have played. OE Nova had a substitute top laner in week 2, did not play week 1, of course, due to the withdrawn team. So PO1 has only played 4 games, and on those 4 games has played 4 different champions now. I think Rumble is one of those champions that just hasn't had a home recently. Especially since the introduction of the Mythic item system. They just haven't felt meaningful to Rumble. Even Night Harvester, which has been kind of the core component for Rumble, has felt a little bit underwhelming on the champion for a long time. However, it's a champion that loves to be hyper-aggressive early, and that's when Ornn is weakest. Before you start to get the tankiness, before you get the ornaments out, while the champion still has a little bit of vulnerability. So if PO1 can snowball early, this Rumble can become a major threat towards the mid and late game.
Definitely the case. I think that the Rumble isn't necessarily going to rock anybody's world when they have to deal with an Ornn, but it certainly is the case that it's also kind of a knowledge check champion. If this Ornn just kind of stays within the Flame Spitter for a little bit too long, yeah, they can in fact have that health bar burned down. So that is something that maybe could get PO1 a small advantage in that early game, but they're really relying on being that big facilitator for explosive team fights off the back of them, Major, Bone Zone to a degree, when it comes to that mid and late game, because that's how you push back against the likes of a Victor.
Yeah, and this Victor is going to be interesting because we've only seen Cuddies play it once. There are other champions in the pool that have been played multiple times. The Malzahar has come out 3 times. The Ryze has come out twice. Ryze, of course, being an interesting one. We don't normally see it at this level of competitive play, but Victor consistently, season after season, has been a priority pick in the mid lane. So for Cuddies, picking it up here, having that scaling, builds well into this team. If they get to 30 minutes, it will be dangerous. But I do worry a little bit because this Divine Temple team seems to be knife's edge. A lot of them have high kill counts, but they have high death counts to match. So if they lose some of those fights early, OE Nova may be able to take advantage of it.
All right. Well, I think it's probably best that we throw it over to a quick break, Alls, and then we could dive into game number one between Optimal Esports Nova and Divine Temple. Optimal Esports, in particular, I think has a little bit of a burden on their back as we casted their sister team yesterday, who dominated 2-0 and showed that they are one of the top contenders here in the OCL. Let's see if Nova can now take that same title here versus Divine Temple. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this matchup between Optimal Esports Nova and Divine Temple here in the Optimal Championship League. This is the second day we've been casting an Optimal Esports team proper in Aulz. I said before that they got a pedigree, but beyond that, they have a burden to be able to stand up to their sister team. And now my question to you is, Aulz, do you think they're going to be able to do that here? Because I think Divine Temple has gotten quite a draft for themselves.
Yeah, I am a little bit concerned. We don't see a lot of Twisted Fate anymore, and for good reason. The champion does feel a little bit underwhelming in modern play, and Rumble, in a similar vein, hasn't been very relevant for a long time. And as you mentioned during draft, the Zeri just hasn't felt as good as other champions have in the bot lane, especially on the current patch. So I do worry that while these players might be playing to their individual strengths, the stats baked into the champions might not be as good as what Divine Temple has picked up. And unless they can come out to a strong, dominant lead from the word go, I do worry that DT is at least going to take this first game.
And already, Cinderace has taken quite a few rough trades versus the superior range of Cuddies on this Victor. About at half health now, trying to get control of the wave. If this Victor actually gets priority and starts exerting kill pressure, then you aren't winning in the early game. You aren't winning in the late game. You really could do nothing except for pray that you get a good teleport on level 6. And from there, you're going to be able to set up for a kill in one of your side lanes.
Yeah, the only saving grace for Cinderace at the moment is the fact that they picked up the Corrupting Potion level 1. So they do have plenty of healing, plenty of sustain in this lane. But as you mentioned, Victor is a champion that should historically struggle early, and right now absolutely dominant over Cinderace. If this trend continues, they are going to be in very, very rough shape.
Wave is staying near the center of the lane. It looks like Cinderace is sacrificing even more of their health in order to ensure that Cuddies can't get a free push. That being said, we are also in a situation where it's going to be pretty hard for either Bone Zone or Owner to gank, and perhaps that's at the end of the day what they want. I don't think that the Victor wants to do much except for get that wave crash and have it start bouncing back, because otherwise you're in a situation like this where now there's a chance that a 2v2 Cuddies has now had their health bar taken quite low by Bone Zone on a little bit of a flank. Now Owner has to accompany the Victor as they want to push the wave in.
Yeah, Wave more likely to push back towards Victor at this point, though. With no mana, Cuddies really doesn't have a way to control this wave back towards them. May be necessary to take a cheater recall and just burn the TP super early here to keep this lane from devolving now that Bone Zone has made it into a little bit better shape. That being said, Wushiwoo is taking a lot of poke in the top side. PO1 has finally gotten some of that pressure that we were hoping to see from the Rumble into the Ornn, as down in the bot lane, the trading continues as well. Crispy taking a turret shot, though, is taking a lot of trading on the way back. And Nyarko, yeah, the Nautilus doesn't work well with Zeri, but your engages need to be a little bit more effective than that.
Yeah, the real issue right now is the fact that Crispy cannot afford to go low versus this lane. Static and Shadow Omen are two champion players who are able to just run down the Nautilus off of their Misfortune and their Janna. Tornado will keep you in place, especially if you're caught out under the tower. Static obviously has that bonus movement speed as well, and therefore the kiting potential is great, and Major just doesn't do enough damage to compensate this early on the Zeri.
Yeah, Major needs a couple items before they'll really be relevant here. But that aside, the game state, 4.5 minutes in, still fairly neutral. There's a small gold lead over to the side of Optimal Nova, thanks to slightly better farming, especially in that top lane, where PO1 has about a 12 CS lead. But overall, Nyarko, this game state is neutral. Who do you think that favors so far?
Well, I think that the Zeri scaling is something that I need to get a better sense of during the current patch, just by virtue of her now having a radically different means by which to build out her items. I think she's still going to be stronger than Static will be on this Misfortune come, 3-4 items. But up until that point, and even beyond that point, depending on how fed Wushiwoo and Cuddies are, Divine Temple can still have the scaling advantage, and that's what worrying me a little bit. Static does have to flash back here, though. This is a great setup for OEN. Shadow Omen takes a lot of abuse as well, has to use that heal, and it's taken to about half health, and that means that this is probably going to be the first reset through that bot side. PO1 has to be careful trying to get one more wave shoved into the enemy tower. Wushiwoo looking to control space, and if they crest over level 6 right here, right now, that could be disastrous for the Rumble.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to be able to get this back off on the bot side that you wanted to see from Static and Shadow Omen with these waves being pushed in again and again. They back here, they're going to lose at least one wave, potentially even two, to the threat and the pressure from Major right now. And in fact, Shadow Omen's back is canceled, so they're now on disjointed back timers. It gets worse and worse for this bot lane.
Cinderace does have to be careful as now Owner and Cuddies are both bearing down upon them. A great stun though, and now Cuddies at only about 100 health means that the TF can at least get a favorable trade back while still dancing at the edge of Owner's influence, given the fact that the Wukong is not quite level 6. Bone Zone also up here makes it a favorable 2v2 for OEN, especially with the Nautilus going up into this river as a bit of insurance as well.
Yeah, this is getting a little bit dangerous for Owner to be hanging around like this. Bone Zone looking to apply the pressure. This could get dicey.
Yeah, Owner's going to be able to back off. Wishy Woo's in a lot of trouble. PO1 does burn their flash and quite a bit of health jumping under the tower, but it seems like this is a pretty favorable trade as the Ornn no longer has the teleport. Neither does PO1, but PO1 has space to play with, while the same cannot be said for the Forge God.
Yeah, the Ornn losing out on health, losing out on minions here, is down over a kill's worth, pushing towards a kill and a half. The Ornn Horn will be called. Can PO1 get out of this?
I think PO1 not only can get out, they're going to be able to pick up first blood. Aulz, just not enough damage there off of the Bellows Breath for Wishy Woo, even with a Brittle Stacks proc, and therefore that is going to be PO1 successfully forging ahead in this lane. And not only that, but they get out from under Owner, who is on a desperate beeline up to the top side. Everything's going up for OEN right now, and in fact, with this gank onto Static, this could just be the Misfortune dead. They have no flash, no ability to get out. Shadow Omen misses their tornado, and Major is the one cleaning up the kill.
And Shadow Omen forced to flash as well. It doesn't rain, but it pours. Nyarko top lane, bot lane, all the lanes just finally falling apart in the way that OENova wanted. And this is the kind of pressure that we needed to see from this team. Given the strangeness of their draft, you need to be dominant on these champions if you're not going to pick something that is meta tier. Right now, though, it's looking good. Yeah, it's looking real good.
And the thing is, Cinderace still has teleport available. They will be able to just reveal everybody on the map if there's going to be a possible contestation of Divine Temple of either this Rift Herald or, I was going to say perhaps that Dragon, but OEN just pivoted from the bot side to take it in an instant. And therefore, it just feels like there's still another play that they could set up for on this map that Divine Temple knows is coming. But the question is, where is the TF going to go to?
Yeah, they will lose this Rift Herald, so at least Divine Temple continuing to exert some form of pressure here. But look at the CS difference. Across the board, every single member of OENova is outperforming their Divine Temple counterpart. That is not good for the scaling team. You want to be close enough that when you hit your scale points, you're not irredeemably behind.
Yep, for sure. And this is one of those games where I feel like Owner needed to focus something besides mid lane. Yeah, Twisted Fate is oftentimes a very tangible and very tasty little morsel to stack on, but you need to save Static, who's just going to get focused yet again with Cinderace teleporting in. Major gets the kill once more, and at this point, the bot lane is almost completely lost for DT.
Yeah, it's lost, and the top side isn't doing any better. DT was not able to respond with a cross map there because Wishy Woo was pushing towards the mid lane. It doesn't get any. Where Shadow Omen's gone. Owner's next to fall here as the depth charge connects. No way for the Monkey King to get out of this one. Going down to Major now, 3-0-1. Well on their way to that static shift. Still have not completed the Cole. Well, Nyarko, the Zeri may not be S tier, but she's certainly feeling relevant.
I mean, a 5,000 gold lead at the 9-minute mark is something that I don't think I've ever seen a team come back from. And Divine Temple, unfortunately, now have their scaling game plan massively reduced in value, as it's Major who's been getting fed and now will become a raid boss. And I don't like the fact that this is this area being played without an enchanter, sure, but it doesn't change the fact that there's still a lot of space to be bought off the back of Crispy and Bone Zone, who so far have been setting up for plays beautifully through the bot lane.
Now, my one question is, Nyarko, we all know that Static Shiv has been good over the last couple of patches. However, it has been nerfed repeatedly to try and bring it back into parity with the rest of the item cast. How do you feel about it being rushed here by Major to take advantage of this lead? Is that how you would want them to be spending their gold if you were this coach?
I think that the static shiv is going to help immensely with wave clear in particular. And while Cinderace also has good wave control, what this is doing is allowing for OEN to spend their time where they so desire. Be that hovering for a play around an accelerated down.
Oh no, Whooshy.
Or something like that. I think that it's a really good call. Whooshy is at 100 health, and PO1 just sees one more rocket sent their way to get another solo bolo. With the kill score of 6-0, I think that OEN certainly are living up to their pedigree here. Aulz, this is more dominant than what we were witnessing last night.
Yeah, Optimal Esports Infinity, well, very good in the late game. Oh no, we're gonna have to put that aside. His owner is locked up, locked down, and dug into the ground. The Wukong dying for another time in the mid lane.
And at this point, it's just a matter of what DC is going to do for game number 2. I'm willing to call this one 11 minutes in, Aulz. I think we could be seeing a sub-20er here, given the fact that Optimal Esports Nova does not miss, and their accelerated pace only continues as that Shadow Omen almost dying just raw to the Zeri ultimate, and now Bone Zone is up here to pincer Whooshy Woo one more time. Here's the knockup, here's the flash, but it's still not enough with the stun coming down, and off-screen, Major kills Static as well in a 1v2, taking even more plates on the way out.
Yeah, Nyarko, I am with you. This game is entirely over. And you mentioned OE Infinity as being the team to whom OE Nova needed to be compared to. I don't think OE Infinity compares to this Nova team, because there has been none of the early game mistakes that we saw from Infinity last night. This Nova team, from the word go, has done what they've needed to do, a weird draft and all. I know they've lost before, but right now, in this game, this feels like one of the most dominant performances we've seen in the OCL this season.
And obviously, I want to see a second game before I can make my statement as to where OEN is oriented versus other teams in the league, as Divine Temple could just be having an off day right now. You know, some games just get out of hand early, and it's an FF15er. You know that you can perform better than this. It's just about getting back out onto the Rift to strut your stuff once more. Right now, though, with the Zeri so fed, the question is, what do you do? I don't care how strong of a player you are. This is going to be a very, very difficult match to come back from.
Yeah, I don't think there's much way to come back unless OE Nova starts making mistakes, starts getting too greedy with the advantages that they have, and try to over push for the victory. But as long as they keep this game intelligent and paced, they should be in good shape. DT just has to start thinking about what they can change to give themselves a better opportunity in game 2.
I would really like to see Optimal Esports Nova go for a perfect game here. I know they've already lost Rift Herald, but I don't really view that as a big objective to focus on. That being said, they are going deep, and I think they are willing to sacrifice members, as this is a huge bullet storm coming out from the Misfortune, but unfortunately Cuddies finds themselves on the wrong side of the fight, and somehow Major is able to heal through most of this. They do have to try to push back away from the Wukong Cyclone, and they succeed in doing so, and now Divine Temple are just set on the run behind its tier 1 tower, but Crispy does not miss with the dredge lines. That Static cowering under this tower with Shadow Omen at their back. How did the Zeri not die there?
You know, Nyarko, I cannot tell you. It felt so incredibly close. Major nearly going down. But if anything kept them alive, it has to be the Triumph. Just such a powerful rune, even if they try and nerf it over and over. Whooshy Woo, very dead in the top side. This Rumble continuing to do work. Oh boy, Nyarko. I think that perfect game is well in reach.
I'm starting to see why Divine Temple was late to the lobby here, Aulz. I think they were just scared of trying to face down Optimal Esports Nova. They wanted a little bit more time to say goodbye to their families before they were brought to the fields of battle. And I mean, it seems deservingly so. This is a slaughter. OEN have put this game away twofold by this point in the game. That is only going to continue to develop, as now at the 15-minute mark, they're going to move on to this next Rift Herald. And frankly, if they can force a fight, we're probably going to see this dropped mid. And like I said, I'm looking for a Dancy Shelling to end this game.
Yeah, you know, Nyarko, I think I only have one problem with your statement, as Cuddies is going to go down here in the mid lane to a double gank. Owner maybe soon to follow, forced to flash away. But this isn't the field of battle. This is an execution ground.
This is also Summoner's Rift, which I don't really know. Isn't there like something called the Fields of Battle within League lore?
The Rift used to be called the Fields of Justice in the previous iteration of the backstory of League of Legends. However, unfortunately, despite the fact that one could say that that writing was bad, Static is dead once again. You're not allowed to exist in front of Major at this point in time. Whooshy Woo similarly caught out. EO1 and Wild Cinderace will happily take that as Shadow Omen may be soon to fall, forced to run away with that Shurelia's. Ooh boy, Nyarko. Let's talk about lore for the rest of the game. How's that sound?
that'd be sick. You know, I was running a like League Jeopardy thing for, I believe, Contingent Esports and Metashift a while back, and I remember having some lore questions on the Jeopardy thing, and nobody got them. It was wild. To be fair, I was going deep, but they were also choosing the $500 questions, and frankly, it's going to be an obscure $500 questions. I asked what what brand's old home in the Freljord was called. Nobody got it. I was very sad.
To be fair, I don't know that offhand either. That is
Rygand's Reach.
Yeah, that's a deep cut right there, Nyarko.
Yeah, Brand lore is awful and probably needs to be... Actually, Brand's lore is good, but he just looks so awful that it makes me retroactively think that his lore isn't good, because how could something so generic and ugly have good lore?
Okay, I would like to counter that with the fact that Rammus's lore technically exists.
But I kind of like the idea of, like, Rammus being this mythical creature, because he's just so silly. It makes sense that there would be some kind of cryptid like Rammus within something as expansive as League's world, right? And I like the idea of there being, like, village festivals where people roll down hills to celebrate the Armadillo. That's sick as hell, man.
Yeah, but even the other cryptids in League of Legends, Cho'Gath, the other Void monsters, they still have... And even not the Void monsters, stuff like what we see from the Hallowed Isles, Maokai, all of that, they still have meaningful lore. Rammus is just, yeah, he's kind of there.
No, but that's the thing. I think that it's fine for Rammus to not have very complex lore. I mean, hell, Aulz, I don't think we actually have proof that Rammus is at all sentient.
You make a good point.
Like, maybe he's just an animal. Maybe he's just a really strong animal that lives in the dunes. And the fact that he has, like, a little, like, tribal mythology built around him in Shurima is kind of sick.
Okay, I'll buy that. I'll buy that for $1. Crispy is very deep and does not care, apparently. Just wandering in, forcing Owner off this blue buff as if nothing is wrong. Doesn't matter that Crispy is the support, because they're only a level down on the Wukong. That's incredible how far Owner is behind right now.
Yeah, Owner is down a lot of CS versus Bone Zone, and the gold gap is immense between these players. Unfortunately, we're at a point right now where, with Optimal Esports Nova almost lapping the field versus Divine Temple, it's going to be an accomplishment for DT to pick up much of anything. The question is, do they even want to prolong this game? Because I certainly don't think I want to cast a prolonged version of this game. Static's gonna die. Major burns their flash in order to do so maybe that could turn into something. PO1 also needs to find out a way versus 4 Red Squad members. They're trying to push back versus the Chaos, or Owner's gonna keep them locked up with the Cyclone, and no! OEN, they lose their perfect game!
What a disaster for OEN, losing the perfection. And of course, it's the man with 700 gold shut down on their head, the Rumble in the top lane, who has been utterly fearless and come so close to death so many times. It's not entirely surprising at this point. And if this game were closer than a 14,000 gold gap at 19.5 minutes, you can hear the laughter in my voice as I say that because it's so ridiculous. If it were closer than that, then the 1,000 gold shutdown would be meaningful. But unfortunately, at this point, I think it's a little bit too far gone.
You know, Aulz, as a fellow lore man, we should really try to build some kind of like tabletop RPG based off of, you know, Runeterra. I feel that would be sick, right? Imagine there being like a D&D 5th edition companion book where you could spec into, I don't know, a Rune Mage class or something like that. And then you could play in Runeterra.
I actually played in a D&D campaign that was almost exactly that for the first few sessions. I played Garen, but not quite Garen because we weren't allowed to play actual champions. It was just a fighter that happened to wave a door around like a sword.
Oh, that's
By the way,
sick.
Wushiwu's dead again, as is Shadow Omen. It just doesn't stop here.
Oh, TF is going for the deep flank. They're going to kill Shadow Omen. And Onare manages to walk out. But honestly, Wukong has been traumatized. It's going to take years of therapy as they watch their companions die time and time again on the Rift.
Yeah, and the death might not be complete. Look at Cuddy's here, cut off from the rest of the team, trying to find some kind of objective bounty by pressuring into this mid turret, but taking a whole lot of damage on the way out. Forced to flash, but going deeper.
Oh, they're gonna flash TP this? No way, they're gonna flash.
Gets out.
They're worth like 100 gold right now, Aulz.
No. They reset their gold.
Oh, okay. It's totally worth it to burn the 2 most important summoner spells in the entire game. Then sorry.
I mean, it's something. With that being said, though, it does look like this OE Nova team wants the Baron. They are 2 minutes late on the spawn camping priority, but they're still doing it pretty fast here. 2 members is more than enough for this entirely fed squad to take this down.
Yep, already about half health, and honestly, that's with not a whole lot of focus from OE. And it looks like Divine Temple will be back out onto the Rift, but frankly, there's no way for them to walk up. They can't stop the backs, they can't stop the take, and frankly, I don't think they could stop OE at any point in this round. It's just a matter of walking this into end. I'm kind of sad that we're actually only 22 minutes into this game, because now it's not really a record maker with PO1's death. It's not a perfect game, and actually, TF is also going to die, but this, I think, will be the final fight as Major is untouched, running down everybody with the wall ride. They get on top of the Janna, they get on top of the Victor, they pick up a double-double, and now it's just a matter of waiting for that wave so they can push into the enemy base.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for the fact that OE Nova was looking at the perfect game outside of the kill from PO1, that would have been a great play. Cinderace going in, causing chaos, and yes, they died, but they bought so much time and space and took so many important summoner spells and cooldowns away from Divine Temple. So in any other world, that is a perfect fight for OE Nova. It just feels bad to have doubled their death count at 23 minutes.
Honestly, given the fact that a perfect game isn't on the table, I'm shocked that they decided to back off here. I think that even if you lost a few members, you probably just roll through this fight once again, and that's the end of it. But it looks like they are going to respect DT and what little power they have. But right now, we're pushing towards a near 20,000 gold lead. And that is something that you very rarely see, even in the most stompy of stomps.
Yeah, this really feels like Vivictus Gaming right now, Nyarko.
Oh.
Just utter domination on the Rift. Now, we were talking about deep cuts. That is a deep cut.
Yeah, I feel like Vivictus wasn't even in a position where they ever lost this hard, because their games were over so fast that there wasn't the time to fully revel in the gold gap. You know what I mean? This is a game that's probably going to like 25, 26 minutes, and that means that we're going to see the 20,000 gold mark crested. I don't think I've ever actually casted this.
Well, there's a first time for everything, you know? Unfortunately for Shadow Omen, they still have not completed their Frost Fang. They are at least 1 trigger away from that, and at 25 minutes, that's almost an achievement in and of itself.
At this point, I'm just hoping for a Zeri pentakill, man.
Gotta have a little bit of everything. If nothing else, we are likely going to see the soul sweep by OE Nova with that final Chemtech Drake spawning in about 5 seconds. They have complete control over the river and about everywhere else on the map, it feels like.
I feel that it wouldn't even be discourteous to FF in this game. I'll be 100% honest here. Divine Temple are just kind of wasting brain power by playing this out any longer. There's no way to come back from 20k down, unfortunately. Optimal Esports Nova could probably sit still on the Rift for 2 minutes, and they could probably still not be able to cut through that gold lead.
Well, we basically just saw Nova sit still for 2 minutes in between the take of that inhibitor and the take of the Drake, and there was absolutely no shift in the gold differential. May have gone down by about 1,000, but Bone Zone in deep, in over the wall, looking to find the Janna. The stun will land, and that Janna is not surviving that one.
Yep. Meanwhile, PO1 is dealing with Wushu on the top side, just looking for another push into this tier 2 tower. They've already used the equalizer. I'm frankly surprised that they're trying to go for the side lanes. I think they just keep running down mid and jamming these waves into the tower. I think there's going to be another deep TF flank. Once again, here's the teleport. Here's the depth charge. Knock up onto Owner, who's unable to get anywhere near Major, who activates the lightning crash. We'll have to flash back from the Chaos Storm, but Cuddy's unfortunately just dies because Bone Zone is now right on top of them, and it's a double-double at the end of the day for Major, and now even more, a triple as the ace comes out. Shadow Omen sitting inside of the fountain. They will be back up in time just to witness their Nexus die. Optimal Esports Nova dominate this game number 1, Aulz, and we are pushed deeper into the series with very little doubt in our mind that OEN is one of the premier teams here in Optimal.
29-3, a 21,500 gold difference. No turrets, no Barons, no Drakes taken by this Divine Temple squad. Words fail, Nyarko. Words fail to describe how much it hurts to look at this damage chart and see that the top 3 members of Divine Temple combined barely crest over the damage that Major did this game.
Yeah, that's how it be, man. And honestly, words fail. That's the reason we talked about lore for half of that game. I hope to see DT improve.
Valid.
I hope to see a closer game for the second round running, but Optimal Esports Nova could easily play at 3 levels below where they're at in this game number 1 and probably still walk away with the victory they need to not only hard lose during the game, but hard lose during draft to ensure that there's no value for them to scale back up and get back into things. Because once OEN have even the slightest bit of a lead, it seems like they are unable to let go of it. Now, Divine Temple will have to contend with that fact as we dive into the next one. We will see you guys on the other side of this short break.